In order to inherit $300 million, a minor league ball player needs to spend $30 million in 1 month. Join us as we chat about the lesson Hollywood learned from Twisters, a private lunch with Mariah Carey, and a waste of Rick Moranis. Then we find out if Brewster's Millions stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says Gladiator with a glut, and Alan says as a father blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Test of Time podcast. My name is Alan Noah, and joining me to help me spend $30 million in 30 days is you, James Brief.
That I spent $30 million in 30 days.
So before we get into Brewster's Millions, I saw this article that I thought was really interesting. It was about Twisters. And, we talked about Twister not that long ago. And basically, the point of this article in the New York Times was that the reason Twisters did really well, better than expected, I think it kind of surpassed expectations, was because the movie didn't mention climate change at all, which I think is a pretty big leap just in logic that that's why the movie did well. But the idea is that people in America, specifically the middle part of the country, don't want Hollywood to lecture to them. They don't want this liberal agenda shoved down their throats. And that very well may be true, but I don't know that that's why Twisters did really well. The counterpoint is that this is a movie about extreme climate events. We know that climate change is real, and it would have been very easy for a line of dialogue in the movie to be, hey, why are these twisters so big and so much twisterier than they ever were before? Well, climate change. And that could be it. Like, it doesn't need to be an inconvenient truth. You don't need Al Gore giving a PowerPoint presentation for 45 minutes. But if you had one line of dialogue, in my opinion, that wouldn't make the movie preachy. But I think maybe for some people it would, like just having the mere mention of climate change would be an immediate turnoff.
I read the article. I find the premise interesting. You're almost trying to take a negative and prove it as the positive or as the causation here.
Yeah.
I think in the end they did what they did in the first film. The first film didn't really talk about anything preachy either about climate change. Well, I guess they could have. It's Michael Crichton. The guy was smart enough to come up with something there if you wanted to. So I think this article may be right for the wrong reason. This is a film that did not like Top Gun, did not go after any particular stance of hot button issues of the day, but it also didn't need to. Yeah, could you have put that line in? Sure. I don't think you needed it, but I agree with you too, Al. Had they put it in, I wouldn't have been like, they're not pushing a radical agenda. This is just some scientist saying it. Yeah. And it's in a movie. There's a scientist in a movie that I saw that said if you drive a DeLorean a certain speed, you might go back in time.
In that New York Times article, they mention a theater in the Midwest somewhere, I forget where, that they had like a sign up with Lightyear, the Pixar movie, because it featured a same-sex kiss. And so they were like, we are going to fast forward that as best we can, but be warned, you might see it. And I didn't see Lightyear, but I don't think that was a particularly political movie. It just had a scene with two same-sex characters kissing, and that was offensive to some people, I guess. And like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
But to me, the kind of point of this article is misguided, because what was the biggest movie of last year, of 2023?
Dune?
No. Barbie. And you didn't see Barbie, right?
I still have not seen Barbie.
Okay, this isn't a spoiler because I'm sure you've heard this, but like, Barbie is political. It is a very feminist movie. It's not subtle about the feminist messaging in that movie at all. And that was the number one box office smash of 2023. So to say that audiences are turned off by any movie with any kind of progressive ideas or liberal agenda or anything like that, like, no, that's not true. We know that from literally one fucking year ago. And Twisters did very well. It exceeded expectations. It's not going to be the number one movie of this year. I mean, Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine have outperformed it already. And to be clear, I'm not rooting against Twisters. Like, cool, people worked hard on it. They made an entertaining movie. I haven't seen it. I probably am not going to rush to see it. But yeah, people like it. Great. It's just like, it's a wrong fucking lesson to say never have any message or theme or anything with some weight in a movie that's still entertaining. No, you can do both.
Well, yeah, I mean, the number one film, or number two, I forget where it is right now, but Avatar, that has a very, very thick hit you over the head with the environmental message there. They do not,
sure.
They're not subtle there. The industrialists are bad, and the environment is good. And that's, one of the number one films of all time.
Exactly.
In the end, Avatar was entertaining to people enough to buy tickets.
Sure. But let's talk about Brewster's Millions. This was a movie that I was very, very, very excited to see. But for anyone who hasn't seen the movie or hasn't seen it recently, it stars Richard Pryor as Montgomery Brewster, a minor league baseball player who unexpectedly inherits $300 million from a wealthy relative. However, there's a catch. To inherit the full amount, Brewster has to spend $30 million in 30 days without acquiring any assets, destroying the money, or giving it away. He also has to keep the terms of the deal a secret. On his spending spree, he hires a lot of people, rents fancy furniture, makes risky investments, throws expensive parties, hosts an exhibition baseball game, and even runs for mayor of New York City. But the partners of the law firm executing the will want Brewster to fail so they can acquire a large fee for their services. So they enlist Warren Cox, a junior lawyer at their firm, to sabotage Brewster. Meanwhile, Brewster is trying to win over Warren's fiancée, Angela, who is keeping track of Brewster's spending. In the end, Warren's scheming is exposed, and Brewster just barely manages to spend every last dollar in time. So this movie that's all about making money and spending money, how much money did it make at the box office?
Oh, this film opened up almost 40 years ago on May 22nd, 1985, and it had a $15 million budget, so a decent-sized budget for the time. It opened at number 3 with $9.8 million. It wound up grossing about $40 million, so this was a pretty decent success for Mr. Pryor. I think he was known more as a straight-up comedian than an actor.
Oh, sure.
He never was a movie superstar, the way that, say, Eddie Murphy was able to transcend from comedy, or Chris Tucker was able to get into, enormous blockbusters. But Richard Pryor, he's on the Mount Rushmore of stand-up comedy, but his stuff can be quite R-rated, and even for today, it can be quite R-rated. I mean, the man accidentally set himself on fire during his rock bottom phase when he was heavily into drugs, and his comeback is that he made jokes about setting himself on fire. I mean, those jokes are... Wow. It was a rare talent, and I was glad to see this was a financial success because he never really had hit it out of the park movie success, I don't think.
Yes. But I had never seen this movie, and I mentioned this at the end of last week's episode. I remember seeing it in the video store. I remember the cover of the VHS tape with Richard Pryor on a pile of cash, but also sinking into the pile of cash, and John Candy's lying on top of the pile of cash. And that was interesting to me as a kid, but I guess not interesting enough for me to ever grab the tape and say, Mom, let's rent this. So I had never seen it. I knew the kind of basic premise of it, but the movie starts with this text on screen that is so unnecessary.
That's the perfect word for it. Unnecessary.
It doesn't tell you anything. It's like, this is a story about Montgomery Brewster. I'm paraphrasing, but it's like he had the American dream, but it was handed to him on a platter, but the platter was like a hot plate or something. It's like, you don't need that. Like, get into it. You see he's a minor league baseball pitcher. cool. Like, just get into this story. And the text on screen happens a couple more times.
And never adds anything.
Never.
Yeah.
Never. It's so fucking weird. And I've gone on and on and on about my hatred of voiceover throughout this podcast. Like, this text on screen is maybe just as bad as like some of the worst voiceover. It just adds nothing. But then you see Brewster as a minor league pitcher. The thing with the train going through the outfield, I had to roll my eyes at that. It takes place in Hackensack, New Jersey, which is pretty close to New York City. And I'm sorry if I sound like a smug New York asshole when I say this, but come on, that would not happen in the New York City suburbs. They would have just built the minor league ballpark, 10 feet that way so that the train would go through the parking lot and not the middle of the baseball field, which would be so dangerous and disruptive and fucking stupid. Why would you do that?
There's so many reasons why that's wrong. However, it does show like what a like kind of piece of shit ragtag Division A minor league team this is. Not that they're necessarily talentless, as we'll find. They actually do have some talent, but there's just a zero budget to this thing. But it's completely absurd because there's one point when all the guys are running back into the outfield and the umpire's like, "Whoa, hold it!" and like a train comes.
Yeah.
What if they were in the middle of a play and like no one didn't see it? Like it's crazy. There's no warnings. I like the premise of this. I actually think it's kind of cute, but it's really dumb execution if you think about it even for a millisecond. And this film actually is about thinking about it because it's got a very, very interesting premise, I think, at its core.
Well, yeah, and let's get into that. So the idea is that Brewster has to spend all of this money in 30 days, but there have to be rules. Which makes sense because otherwise, if you had to spend $30 billion in 30 days and there were no rules, yeah, that would be really fucking easy. Just go and buy a lot of crazy expensive shit.
Yeah, just buy one island somewhere. That's $30 billion.
Yeah, exactly. But you can't have assets.
Right. I thought that they did a decent job of covering up some of the holes. He said you can give 5% to charity, you can gamble 5%, which I thought was actually clever because that is one of the clever things that comes back to bite Brewster. And he says, yeah, I know what you're thinking. You're going to buy a couple of Picassos and then burn them in the fire. No, you can't. They probably can't close all the loopholes, but there's a lot open to interpretation of what you could do, and there's a couple scenes I think are so clever, and a couple scenes just like the train thing. It's very clever, but wait, don't think about it because then it might not be so clever at all.
I think that's it, right? Like some of the ways that he spends his money are really clever, and a lot of this movie takes place in New York City, and you know this because you live there, James. But the thing about New York City is that so much is available for rent. And that is the key. And Brewster knows that. He spends a lot of his money renting things, which is within the rules, right? Like you can spend money and get value for something and then not have an asset. That is literally what renting is. In Manhattan, you can rent anything. And so that just seems like the obvious solution. Rent 30 penthouse apartments throughout the city for 1 month leases, and then you're spending the money. You're not going to have an asset. It will be gone at the end of 30 days. Easy peasy.
You had never seen this film. I've seen this film many times, and actually, but I haven't seen this film for easily 30 years, probably 35 years or more. This is a film that even as a very young boy, I would kind of take to some of the logic in this film and think exactly what you're thinking about, how it's very easy to just spend this money. And of course, today, I think you'd have to make it, let's say it's $100 million that he has to spend in 30 days. Doesn't like Mariah Carey do like a private concert for like $1 million that, she sings for some person and it's like $1 million to do that. Yeah, have her for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You could technically do that. I mean, or have a duet with her and Taylor Swift. That's not going to be cheap. My point is that even as like a 5-year-old, I saw this film and I was like, There's so many ways to win this, because my favorite scene in this film, there's a very famous stamp. Had you seen this stamp before? Had you heard of this stamp before, Al?
Oh, the upside down plane?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know anything about fucking stamps, but I know about the upside down plane.
That's the one stamp that everyone knows about. So he buys this stamp for like $1.5 million. And, just like the bankers who are rooting against him, you're like, you idiot. Like, if anything, like rare things appreciate in value. Like, it's probably going to be worth more now that it's been in the press. But what does he do? He fucking uses the stamp to mail a postcard. I thought that's so clever. He didn't destroy it. He used it.
Yeah.
I remember as a child thinking, well, why don't you just do that 50 more times and you're done?
Yeah.
These bottles of wine that are from the 1800s that are probably disgusting, go and drink it. I mean, that's the use of the wine.
They do that. He does that at one point in the movie. He buys all these bottles of wine.
But just do it again.
Yes.
I do think it's kind of clever that he just says, bet everything on a long shot, and then the long shots won. So that actually, I like that. I like that setback.
The gambling thing backfiring, that's funny. Like, it seems like it will work, but it doesn't. However, then he also hires a business manager for no reason. Like, the only reason he could possibly agree to that is because he has to keep all of the rules of this inheritance thing a secret. But when they say, hey, here's this guy who is known for making money and he's going to help you make money, and he says, yeah, sure, he can be on the payroll. Like, no, that's obviously going to backfire. That is painfully stupid. And so when that guy makes the investment that makes him a ton of money and he's frustrated, it's like, well, yeah, what did you think was going to happen?
Right. You kind of almost want to go the route of the producers when he does his Springtime for Hitler. You want to get some absolute nut job that is saying the worst possible things, and maybe he winds up striking gold. There actually is a kind of a clever thing where some guy tries to sail an iceberg to the Middle East or something. And yeah, it's a ridiculous premise, but it does work. That could actually be kind of funny. I actually really like the subplot about the New York Yankees. He basically, with his wealth and clout, he basically arranges it that they have an exhibition game against the Yankees. The other guys, not Monty, are really highlighted, that there's some decent talent on this team.
But how does he spend money on that? It wasn't clear on what he was spending money on at that game.
That's true. But I still like, this is something I actually just like that he bought with his money. I just like that idea. I remember not liking the fact that they took Monty out of the game, because Monty was pitching very decently. He was doing well and you're proud of him. He got to fucking get a strikeout against a Yankee. I mean, what more could you want if you're a pitcher? But he does. He winds up, kind of blowing the game. They don't even tell you how the game ends. Do they? I don't think they do.
No, they do. They lose 4-1.
Oh, they lose. Okay, they lose
because
4-1.
of the Grand Slam.
Right. Yeah, the Grand Slam. But I remember as a kid thinking it was stupid that they take him out of the game. And I'm like, it's a fucking exhibition. And he got you there with the helicopter and everything. But then I actually kind of thought about this time. And I actually think Monty, who at his core is I think he's a good, decent man. I think he wants to be treated like any other pitcher would be treated who was in that game. And he pitched a Grand Slam, and Jerry Orbach, rest in peace, I appreciate it more than I was a kid. That frustrated me as a kid. I was like, let him do it. It's his dream.
But Orbach says, don't upstage the rest of the players because this is their shot too. So I think that's why Brewster leaves, is because he gives up the Grand Slam and he doesn't want to be the only thing that people are talking about, which of course he will be the only thing that people are talking about because he's the eccentric millionaire who bankrolled the whole thing.
Well, except for the Yankees scouting manager. Everyone will be talking about Brewster except that guy that saw, a few really good catches and a few really good plays. There's another subplot of this film I want to talk about where it goes political. And Monty,
Yeah.
this is actually kind of brilliant. When if you want to throw your money away, basically Monty decides to run for mayor and self-fund his campaign. That's brilliant. You could spend so much money in advertisement. There you go. Election. There's no way this could backfire and he can make the money. Although they do say if he does win, he will get a salary. However, I don't think he gets that salary until he's sworn in. So I don't think he would have an asset. I didn't think that was fair.
That's a very, very good point. It takes time, even if you win the election. And look, the idea of a rich asshole running for office, even though he has no policy ideas, but he just kind of wants to fuck over democracy. Yeah, that does stand the test of time. Looking at you, Donald J. Trump. People do that. And at first, when the movie kind of was going in that direction, I was like, okay, interesting. What is this movie going to say about politics? And in the end, it says nothing really. I mean, I guess you could make the argument that he endorses the idea of voting for none of the above, and the two guys who are running for mayor are both corrupt. And because so many people vote for none of the above, then there will have to be a new election with presumably, hopefully, better candidates, which I guess is a good thing, but I feel like the movie was trying to go for some kind of statement, some kind of message, and it just fell flat, I thought.
I couldn't have said it better. It's actually an intriguing premise. And again, I think Monty, Richard Pryor, he's very charming in this film. For me, I'm rooting for him. I like him. And he's very, man of the people as he's talking and against these two, random corrupt politicians. It just doesn't stick the landing because there's no meat to it. It's not there, but it's almost something really clever, but it doesn't get there.
No, it really doesn't. And I think you could also argue that this movie could make a point about money in general. And it could be something basic and trite, quite frankly, about money can't buy me love. Money doesn't buy happiness. In the end, he realizes that he doesn't need the money. What he needs is the love of Angela, the paralegal who's keeping track of his expenses. What he really needs is just the friendship of his buddy, Spike, played by John Candy. That's what matters. But the movie doesn't really land there either. He wants the money, he needs the money. And an idea is set up early in the movie when the rich uncle is explaining his will in the video message, and he says, I'm going to make you spend so much money that you're going to hate it. You're going to hate having money.
The cigarette analogy that you were caught smoking cigarettes, young man. Well, you're going to smoke the whole carton and then you'll be sick to your stomach and you'll never smoke again. Or you'll be addicted to nicotine.
Right. And the movie dabbles in that because Monty does kind of say towards the end that I'm sick of being this rich asshole. That's not who I am. Everyone hates me. I don't want to be this guy. Yes. And it just falls apart. It's going somewhere, but it doesn't get there. It doesn't land with any point, which is frustrating. I don't think this movie needs to have some brilliant take about money or wealth or windfalls or anything like that, but it could say something, and it just really doesn't.
I think you said the single review that 5-year-old me would have said about this film.
Okay.
So, I mean, that being said, Al, do you think that Brewster's Millions stands the test of time?
No, I don't. I think part of the reason is not only does it not have any kind of big picture theme, but also it's not that funny. And it should be really fucking funny because it stars Richard fucking Pryor and the co-star is John fucking Candy. These two guys are so funny, and the movie is mildly amusing. There are a few jokes in there that are chuckle worthy, but it's nowhere near as funny as it should be. Also, there's a lot of just script inconsistencies that I noticed. Like when they're talking about him paying for all of these political ads, they say that he's not just paying for ads in New York City, which would make more sense because that's where he's running for mayor, but he also took out ad spots in all 52 states. And I'm like, well, wait a second, 52? So is it supposed to be like some alternate universe where Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico are states?
That's weird. That's very weird.
Also, they say that Monty has played in the majors. Like, he's in the minors now. This is the tail end of his baseball career. But they say that he played in the majors for 15 years. They also say that his highest salary ever was $11,000 a year when he played for Toledo, which cannot be true if he played in the majors, even if he was on a crappy team, even if he was making the league minimum, as we know from Major League, he would have been making more than that. And the uncle in the video is like, "You're a failed ball player." Not for nothing. If you play in the majors for 15 fucking years and then end up in the minors, no, you're not a failed baseball player. That's a career that most people would fucking kill for.
Facts.
Right? You know, some of the comedy is just like overly cartoony. They don't do it a lot, but there's some of like the cartoony sound effects when Warren falls down and like wubba wubba wubba. Also, this movie is guilty of an infraction that is completely unforgivable. It wastes Rick Moranis. It completely wastes Rick Moranis. He shows up for like 30 seconds. All he does is mimic what Monty is saying, and then he's gone. And like, I didn't want to see more of that character because that character sucked and was annoying, but also it's Rick Moranis, so I do want to see more of him. But yeah, I think that this movie does not stand the test of time, although it is worth noting that Brewster's Millions was a novel that was originally published in 1902, and there have been so many movies of Brewster's Millions. 1914 by Cecil B. DeMille, 1921, 1926, 1935. There's a bunch of Indian movies, Brewster's Millions, and various spins on it. So this concept apparently kind of does stand the test of time. The most recent one was 2018, Hello, Mr. Billionaire, a Chinese movie based on this novel. So at least in other countries, they're still milking this premise. But this movie, this 1985 version, definitely does not stand the test of time. Do you agree, James?
In short, yes, I do. I didn't like this film when I was a child, and I was really curious as to whether, letting us marinate for a few decades would change my mind about things that I think this might be the first film that I found like myself as a 5-year-old breaking down why this is a bad film for almost exactly the reasons you're saying and that we talked about earlier in this podcast. Yeah, my opinion has not changed. The film actually has some fascinating premises, and actually some scenes are really intriguing. I think Richard Pryor is actually kind of delightful in the film. I think the political part almost has something. The biggest problem that I think is actually the biggest potential in this film, that maybe is in the novel, I have no idea, is that I don't think he genuinely gets sick of spending money. He does not get his carton of cigarettes moment where maybe he should lose John Candy for a while because he's such a douchebag and he's hanging and he's going to like, oh, I'm going to go to the like $1 million a night clubs every night. That really alienates his buddy. It's a little cliche, but that could work there. Or he's just with, the worst woman ever because she's just there because she's so shallow, and he really, really hates the spending the money. That is a great lesson that would be difficult to portray, but I think would be fun to portray. Just that you don't get the whole desire that he should be sick of the money. This kind of, in theory, altruistic goal of the uncle that when he'll get the $300 million, he won't want to spend it because he's so sick of spending money. all these good ideas there. It's just, it doesn't amount to a well-made film. The end product is poor, and I'm actually not surprised you said this film has been made a dozen times as a novel and other things, because it's actually a very clever idea. I love this idea. I love the last line of your review. It's this particular story, the only one I've ever known or read about, this particular 1985 version of Brewster's Millions. It does not work, and it does not stand the test of time.
You know, it's not high concept. I'm not quite sure what the right phrase is that I'm looking for, but a movie that has a really interesting premise that is like kind of out there and weird and makes you say, this is an interesting premise for a movie. I feel like that was kind of more of an 80s thing. Like even another movie co-starring John Candy, Splash, right? Like it's a mermaid and she comes to New York and it's a wacky rom-com. Like that's the kooky premise. I feel like comedies today aren't that. I feel like comedies today are more kids being kids or adults being immature or here's a group of weirdos who are doing some weird stuff. It's not like high concept. It's not a one-liner premise. The most recent example that I can think of off the top of my head, I maybe should have researched this ahead of time, is The 40-Year-Old Virgin. Here's the wacky premise. This guy's 40 and he's a virgin. I mean, that's kind of a wacky premise, but the comedy in the movie comes from that. It also kind of just comes from the characters. I don't know. Am I articulating this well at all? I feel like I'm just kind of rambling. Do you know what I'm saying?
I think you have the same problem I have, that there's too many loopholes in this premise, that it's kind of a very easy game. I think you would have to remake it. Actually, instead of saying the exceptions, you'd probably have to narrow it to some very specific things you can spend it on. And then you might have something interesting there. Because you theoretically could do it, but it'll take a lot of hard work and you might have to be a piece of shit to do it. So you might have to make some interesting decisions. I think if it's so open, it's so easy to spend an unlimited amount of money.
I think you hit it on the head, because it's not that this movie needs more rules about how we can spend the money, because that's annoying. That bogs it down. That's like exposition, and you kind of have to keep track of what you can do and what you can't do. That's not what the movie needs. But also, the movie does need some rules and parameters, because otherwise, yeah, it's fucking easy. And, you know, every time travel movie has its own time travel rules, and zombie movies have their own rules, and that's okay, but it can't be too complicated. Actually, you know what I was thinking? We talked about how the text on screen in this movie is fucking stupid and pointless. Maybe it would have been helpful if there was like a little counter in the bottom right. It doesn't have to be there the whole entire movie, but whenever he spends money, you see it kind of go down. And then when, oops, he made a bet and he won money, it goes up. So you can kind of track it in real time. Maybe that's helpful. Maybe that's annoying. Maybe that's gimmicky. I don't know. But I'm just trying to think of ways to help this movie, and I can't, because it was made 40 years ago. But that's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we are going to be talking about Airheads with special guest Jason Allen. I have seen that movie exactly once, I think a very, very long time ago. You must have seen that, right? It's an Adam Sandler movie.
I've never seen this one.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you get to watch a new in air quotes Adam Sandler movie. That's kind of cool.
That's right.
Not literally new, it's 30 years old. But I am excited to talk about Airheads. Until then, we want to hear from you. How would you spend $30 million in 30 days? Let us know. We are at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, X, Instagram, and Threads. And we'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye.